Good evening and welcome to the second Inside Government show for the fall 2024 semester here at Cayuga Community College. This is a show that's on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, as well as ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access, and Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have back in the studio two people who normally do not appear in the studio together. We have Cayuga County Sheriff Byron Schenck and Auburn Police Chief James Slayton to come in to talk about law enforcement and give an update. It's been a couple of busy months for both of you, both together and separately, with school safety issues, which we'll talk about, both here in Auburn and in Southern Cayuga. An officer-involved shooting that I'm not sure that's the proper term for it, and I want to ask about that, as well as what's going on just in general on public safety. So we want to thank you both for agreeing to appear together, and I wish I wore my uniform as well. I do want to start, though, if you don't mind, because I know your badge is a little different than when you're normally here. It is hot pink. Why?
We wear pink badges in October for Breast Cancer Month, and we did an inlay of a purple ribbon for domestic violence.
And so mid-month, this is all domestic violence, but there will be several events. I know the county does a number of them around the courthouse. Those are still planned for not next week, the week after?
They are. I believe the 17th is the event at the courthouse.
Okay. So I want to talk in general about some things, and they may not be necessarily particular to Auburn and Cayuga County, but we're obviously in the national level. We're in the throes of a national campaign right now, and all we hear are either about immigrants, the economy, or crime is up. From your perspective of your locality, of the city and of the county, let's just go back 4 years. You've been in the job 5 years?
6 years.
6 years, and you've been in the job, feels like 77, but three. So let's go back 4 years, for an average front. Is crime, and we can divide this up into what you define as violent crime or just non-violent crime. Is crime up in the city right now?
I wouldn't say crime is up. It's been pretty steady. What we deal more with now is mental health issues and homelessness. So our officers are tasked with dealing with the public more on that end rather than the violent crimes.
Okay. How about for the...
I would say, it's definitely not up out in our community. We police primarily a rural area, and we haven't seen any significant spike in violent crime, but I feel like we're busier than we ever have been. Thankfully, we're busier than ever, and that's dealing with a lot of the social issues that we're tasked with dealing with that we didn't have to deal with not so long ago. And we're dealing with the homelessness and the mental health issues and all of those different things. So I wouldn't say violent crime is up, but we are still pretty busy out there. We do still have a pretty steady amount of crime that we deal with, but I wouldn't say violent crime is up in our community.
And what do you both define as, I'm not looking for the textbook answer that you do at the academy. What do you both consider violent crime?
Assaults, robberies,
okay,
things like that.
And what about, you just mentioned 40 seconds ago, domestic violence. And where are we on that? I know during COVID, there was a spike. People are all together. Traditionally, I know it's usually around the holidays where you see spikes. COVID was a whole different thing. Where are we with domestic violence right now in your world?
We're still seeing a steady number of cases with domestic violence. And, one thing that I noted last year, we saw a significant number of arrests for violations of orders of protections that were issued during domestic violence situations. In fact, at one point, I know last year we had 41 individuals in our jail that were facing charges that included a criminal contempt charge. So very significant. I think those numbers might be down a little bit this year. I haven't looked at those closely, but that is something that remains steady.
And you don't adjudicate those people. They just end up in your building. What traditionally has happened to them of those 41? They go through the court system, and are they released? Are they?
It depends. Every case is different. Some may wind up staying with us for a period of time if they're sentenced to a particular sentence within our jail. Some may go on to the state dock system, Department of Corrections, depending on how serious the incident was, or if they haven't had many offenses and they're adjudicated and released on some type of probation or some type of lesser charge, that happens too. But every case is different.
And how about in the city when it comes to domestic violence?
In the city, it's pretty steady. We continue to see it. Neighbors are close by. there's a lot more eyes on you in the city than in the rural areas. So our domestic violence rates are still up there. And again, we see some of the same things, the criminal contempts, the violation of the orders of protection. So we make those arrests. A lot of them are aggravated because they commit another offense with that, which makes it a felony.
And one item that's kind of attached to this, though sometimes it's not necessarily a criminal act, but I know you've been extremely involved in this for years, has been this issue of overdoses, and I know the city as well. We saw some change in numbers because of COVID. Again, I don't want to use COVID as a marker, but it was of some sorts. Where are we on overdoses? I know Narcan has been a great help, whether people support it or not. It's been a great help in reducing those numbers. How are the overdose death numbers, though?
So the death numbers look a little better than they have in years previous, and we're seeing fewer people that are intentionally using opiates like heroin and fentanyl and those types of things. But what we're seeing, unfortunately, is a shift from those drugs to some of the synthetic drugs that are out there. So the numbers can be somewhat deceiving when you see the overdose deaths going down and maybe the opiate overdoses going down. But what's concerning is a lot of individuals are shifting to these synthetic drugs, and we see, and I know that they see way more in the city than we do out in the county, but we're seeing a lot of that. So there's just been a shift, and you see that periodically from year to year from one drug to another. So it's great that we're not losing people, but
is it a combination of drugs or just one or two particular?
Combination of drugs, the synthetics.
And where are they coming from? First of all, they can't be regulated quick enough. Somebody changes the formula, it may not necessarily be in the code to say that's illegal today. It might be 6 months from now, but they've moved on to a different formula, correct?
Correct. When they change the chemical compounds to them, it changes the makeup of it. And then it becomes not a Schedule I drug, just becomes an illegal substance that they're putting additives to. And that's the problem, is they don't know what they're putting in their systems.
And how are overdose numbers for you in the city?
The overdose numbers are down. Like you said, a lot of it has to do with Narcan. A lot of people are out there educating others about how to use it. More people are carrying it. We don't get called as much. But we're also dealing with that homeless population that isn't so much on the streets anymore. They're in a wooded area somewhere. So we don't know that there was an overdose and if they Narcan themselves.
And is that, in your mind, is that homelessness because of poverty or because of mental health issues or a combination of both? Or do you trace it to anything if you're seeing numbers up?
No, there's a lot of different reasons people are homeless. Some of them want to be. Some of them have been removed from the hotels and motels in the area because a lot of times there's consequences to their actions, so they get removed from there. They won't go somewhere else. And
is that the same in the county?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I agree with that. Mental health, poverty. I think it's a lot of things.
This is not related to this, but so don't please attach it to the stream. I know there's a story in this week's Citizen about a new shop opening up in the block, the old Nolan block, with medical marijuana. Any concerns about that, whether impairments or sales in the city?
I've met with both owners, the owners of it. They had me over, walked me through the building. It's going to be a secure facility. It's not going to be like the illegal places that are selling to minors now and selling the illicit drugs.
So you shut those down. So I think you were both in the photos that I saw.
Correct.
You both shut those down, or the state shut them down. You were both all involved in that. What's the difference between that and what's going in the Nolan block?
The stuff at the Nolan block is regulated by the state.
Okay.
So they can't have stuff out in the counter. It's got to be in the jars. It's got to be behind a wall to disperse it to somebody else. ID's required, so they're not going to be selling to minors. You're going to have to show ID. They scan it in. So there's a lot more layers.
And so the criticism of why even allowing this, and I don't know what your views are on this, though we may have asked about it before, do you worry about the sale of marijuana in Cayuga County as being an impairment when people are driving or just in their daily lives?
Well, I think it's certainly a concern, something that we have to be concerned with, but obviously it has been legalized, it's here, and I want to see stores locally that are regulated because these stores that are not are just, they're marketing to kids. They're doing, they're selling marijuana that's not regulated. We don't know what's in it. So it's here, it's legal. I'd rather see it be sold from a regulated facility.
So I want to go to school safety. That was the original reason to have you both on. And so we're most likely 10 minutes in. And so you both have dealt with different types of cases, one in the county, one in the deal. So let me deal with the county first. So at the end of the first week of school, if I remember correctly, there was a false lockdown, as I'll call it. If it's a different term, please correct me, in Southern Cayuga. What happened?
So our 911 center received a panic alarm that came from the Southern Cayuga School District. So once they received that alarm, we don't know if that's some type of shooting incident or what that could potentially be, but multiple law enforcement patrol cars were dispatched to that school. We did get to the school along with the New York State Police. We searched the school. We determined that there was no emergency there, no active incident, and fortunately it was just a malfunction with their alarm system.
Were there any issues? I got some emails, so I want to clarify this, so I don't want to say it in the wrong way. Were there any questions about how people were notified? I think I had one email that said that parents were notified everything was clear when some students were still locked down.
That I'm not familiar with, so
Okay.
I don't know how the school notified parents. That wasn't something that came from the members of
Right, it
our
wouldn't be
sheriff's
that,
office,
okay.
but I can't speak to that.
So my bigger question for you is, it took 15 minutes, and that's not a criticism. We have a long and narrow county. You may know that more than anybody else in this whole entire building. It took 15 minutes from start, from when you got the panic alarm, I think, for you and troopers to get there. That's a long time. What needs to be done to shorten those times? Is it possible to shorten those times?
So we police a 700 square mile area here in Cayuga County. As you said, it's very large. So our rural school districts, that's not uncommon to be that far away from a rural school district. So that's why it's so important for our schools to have student resource officers in them, armed security, and that we work to train and prevent these types of things from within the school district, because many of the school shooting incidents that have happened across the country, they're over in a matter of minutes. So these response times can be a concern.
And do all of our rural schools, I'll get to the city because I know there's a difference there, do all of our rural schools currently, including BOCES, have SROs or some type of security on site?
All have some form of security or student resource officers there, but it's kind of a mixed bag how they do that.
So they're not necessarily sheriff's deputies?
Correct.
So in your case, you have SROs, school resource officers, or employees who are former law enforcement in all of the schools in the city of Auburn, correct?
Correct. We have special patrol officers with peace officer status.
Okay. And most of them were SROs.
Correct.
Before they retired. I want to go now, so that's what happened in the county. I know there was another incident, somebody told me about another community, but let's deal with Cayuga for this. City was a little different. It was 3 days later, and there was an alleged threat for the junior high school next door here to the college. In your mind, what happened?
So initially that threat came out to Auburn. It was Georgia. Somebody went in and changed it to New York.
Okay.
But through the ID of the school, we were able to look at that was Georgia. But then it started getting pushed around socially around here through the schools.
So was it a credible threat about Auburn, New York?
We have to take everything as if it happened here. By the time we figured out that through the Crime Analysis Center that it was not happening here, we had already gone through days of trying to determine who sent it to who, evaluate that, move on to the next person.
Did you ever track it down?
We never tracked it down, but through the Crime Analysis Center in the state, they determined that there were 3 other states that this originated from, and it was not Auburn, New York.
So I had this conversation with the new superintendent and Misty Slavic last week, and Jeff Parazola was here, the former superintendent. There seemed to be a messaging issue that came out that Monday night, where the district said it was not specific to Auburn, New York, but within 30 minutes, I think APD had a similar Facebook post but said the junior high. Was there a messaging issue there?
So I wouldn't call it a messaging issue.
It
put out
aggravated some parents.
I put out what school was the second alleged social media going around was the junior high.
Okay.
But at that time, we have to take everything as if it is a real threat until we can determine it's not.
And that next morning, so let's just say that came out late Monday afternoon, Monday evening, you had a different setup than normal at the junior high.
Correct. That's a double-edged sword sometimes, because we want to show the public that we're going to take everything serious. We put extra officers at the schools. But then when you do that, the public's like, okay, it must be a real threat because there's more police there. So we're not going to keep officers away from the schools to show the parents that we will be there if needed.
So how did both of you in your departments, I know in your case you've had for a very long time people monitoring social media. I think you and your predecessor have both done that. I don't know if the county does that to the intensity of the city. How big a concern are you about those types of threats that come just through social media that may not be traceable, very easily traceable?
Well, a lot of them aren't. We get swatting incidents on
You gotta
school
explain
threats.
what a SWAT issue is.
It comes through another platform that isn't someone's original number here, and it's a message that goes out that there's an active shooter somewhere, and you don't know until you get there. We've been to people's houses and schools.
And your department had to react to one just east of here with Congressman Williams,
Correct.
where somebody called in a threat in your department.
Correct, on a holiday, and it ended up being a false threat.
How big are SWAT problems for you?
We've had a couple in our community with Brandon Williams, and we've had a couple others. But if I could add really quick,
Sure,
Guy,
absolutely.
I want to mention that as we're talking about these situations in our schools, we have to take every threat serious, and we've been doing a lot behind the scenes. We partnered with the city and a number of community agencies, mental health, DSS, a number of agencies to work on behavioral threat assessment. And what that is if somebody is exhibiting some potentially threatening behavior, whether it's a student or somebody connected to a school or anybody in our community, we need to know about that threatening behavior so that we can try to work to get them on a different path to do some preventative work. So we're doing everything we can to try to prevent potential violence in our community. And I don't want I don't want people to be unduly alarmed, but it's very important that you see something, you say something. We're doing a lot behind the scenes when it comes to preventative work.
Because you can't take any threat as just being, well, that's nothing.
Correct.
Correct.
Because that's the one that's going to slip by.
Correct.
I want to ask you, and I want to parse the words here. About a month and a half ago, there was an alleged incident in August about an officer-involved shooting. First of all, can you tell us what happened at the incident, and would you have, now looking at this 60 days later, 50 days later, is that the right terminology to use? When I think of an officer-involved shooting, I think of something, I'm not sure if that's what I thought of that night. So tell us what happened.
So what happened that night was an individual went there to meet with an underage female to engage with a sexual act. Once that happened, he was confronted by officers. He pulled out a handgun, pointed at the officers. He then quickly put the gun to his own head, pulled the trigger, and committed suicide. Our officer had fired, missing the individual. That's why it's considered an officer-involved shooting. The officer pointed his weapon and fired it in the direction of an individual.
Before the person killed themselves, or after?
It was simultaneously.
Okay.
It happened so fast that, and at that point, that's what we have to call it because we have to notify the state.
We'll get to the state in a second.
Okay.
So, so I guess what I'm saying is that for the common person, they would say that if the police officer didn't shoot the individual, it's not really an officer-involved shooting. It's somebody who killed themselves. They committed suicide.
I think it's important, too, that at the time that press release went out, there had been shots fired. We had to alert the public as to what we were dealing with. We didn't know with 100% certainty that the officer hadn't hit the individual. So that was confirmed not to be the case the following day, certainly through the autopsy. But in that moment, when that release went out, to put the public at ease that there was no further concern for any danger in that area. You know, we weren't 100% certain, so
Okay.
I think at the time that was the appropriate language, but you know, certainly things looked different as the investigation progressed.
And we should make it clear, an officer did not kill an individual.
He did not. He did not hit the individual either.
So, again, good delineation. We should make that clear as well. So one of the first things that occurred, though, that night was that you did not investigate this. You called him.
Correct. Well, we both had people on the scene.
Okay.
So at that time, we're required to contact the state. And one of the things we wanted to make sure was, with an incident where we're both involved, is it okay for me to turn this over to
And
the
did the
sheriff's
state
department?
okay that?
Yes.
Okay. And so your office did what?
So we essentially investigated the incident in partnership with the state, being the state police, the New York State Attorney General's office, and certainly alongside with everybody involved from the Auburn Police Department. We all have great working relationships as it is, and you know, that incident was no different. But the chief had asked if we would assist with that, you know, from an outside perspective looking in, and then we coordinated, you know, the efforts with the New York State Police and the Attorney General's office.
So as far as you're concerned, what are the findings?
Well, I don't know that we're prepared to exactly release everything, but it's
So you haven't gotten to that point yet.
We're just about there. We're still analyzing some digital evidence, cell phones and some camera evidence, but it is safe to say, and we've already mentioned that you know, the individual did shoot himself. This was a self-inflicted gunshot wound that was not caused by the officer, and no wrongdoing by the officers, clearly.
And so the Attorney General comes in because, is this state law or a state mandate?
State law.
State law. So the Attorney General comes in, did they close their books on this investigation, or are they waiting for you?
So it's still open as far as they're concerned too, so we're still working with them. So I'm not in a position to say that's closed until they're comfortable with that as well.
Again, 45 days, 50 days, 60 days at the same. Forgetting what occurred that night with the individual and the officer firing their gun. What are the takeaways, process-wise, for you when it comes to training or when it comes to investigating things of this nature? Is there anything you would change from that night, other than not having that incident occur?
I can't speak on the criminal side of it because it's still under investigation by the sheriff's department, but we still have to call that an officer-involved shooting.
So is it going to change the way either of you train your officers?
No, I think you know what happened there was a result of the actions of this individual who thought he was coming to that location to have, you know, sexual relations with an underage female. His actions dictated what happened. I think the officers did a tremendous job. I've seen the videos multiple times. I think the APD officers did an incredible job. They acted with restraint. There was only one round fired by an officer simultaneously. They did a great job, but I don't see where anything would need to be done differently here.
So I've had you both on separately to talk about recruitment, because that has always been one of the biggest challenges. And I know in your case, your police force right now is much younger than it may have ever been in recent memory. I'm not sure about yours.
Same thing.
Same thing. So I'm not going to say I have suits and ties that are older than some of your officers, but in the past you've come on. So let's talk about where you are right now with what has been budgeted by the city. Where are you, a number of officers? Either are you on par? Are you short? Where are you overall?
We're currently 4 officers short. We have 2 in the academy, which still leaves us 4 short.
Still after
So after they graduate, it'll still leave us 4
And do you
short.
have others in line to go? Because one of the issues you've had is you give a test, you go through the whole list, and you don't have a list available. When's
Correct.
your next test?
We gave the test last week.
Okay, but you won't get the results for some time.
We won't get the results. We have an agility test on October 26th, and that's where typically we lose a lot of people. So last night we held a practice agility for them to come in. It doesn't count against them. Just come in and see where they're at.
How'd it go?
We had a handful of people there last night, which was good.
And what are your numbers?
With our road patrol division, we're down one member, which is good for us. We're in good shape there. But within our jail, we're down 7 positions. And if I could quickly plug, we're having an open house Monday night to try to help fill those. So this coming Monday night, the 7th, from 5 to 7 p.m. at our sheriff's office.
So does someone in the jail have the same training requirements as, saying, somebody who goes through the academy
Different training. They do attend an academy, but certainly different
How
training.
long? Is it a different period of time?
It's a little bit shorter, about 12, 13 weeks for the custody division versus about 26 weeks for the road patrol.
And do you have an active list right now?
We don't. So we did also give the patrol test last Saturday. We're waiting for those results. And the reason for this open house is that we're preparing to give the exam in November. So there's still the opportunity for individuals to sign up and take that currently if anyone's interested in joining us.
Why is it so difficult to get officers? I don't know that this was a problem I would have saw 30 years ago. You joined at what, 97?
98.
98. I don't know that it was an issue back then. I've known you since you most likely came in, what, 2000?
1997.
1997. So known you both long enough. Why is it tougher to hire officers today than it was 25 years ago?
Social media.
Everything's
It's tough. Everything is out in the public's eye. Everybody has a perception of what happens before the facts are found out. So it's tough to recruit people. There's officers that don't want their family members to do this, and then there's some that do, as you know.
Right.
So we have a long history of that in our department.
Know it well. How about for you? Anything?
I think from my perspective, I think certainly all of the negative that's out there that people see, but I don't think we in law enforcement do a good enough job of promoting what a great job it is. I think we need to do a better job because it's an awesome career. I would encourage anybody that wants to do it to come forward because I wouldn't change anything.
So since you were last here, you had a little bit of a go around with the legislature on some positions. Have all the positions that you've asked that were budgeted for last December in a budget the majority of the legislature passed, have they all been filled now?
Not everyone. I did seek to fill 2 budgeted positions, and there was some concern about whether or not I'd get the funding. The legislature ultimately voted 7-4 to allow me to fill those 2 budgeted positions, which I'm working on. I did have 1 additional budgeted position that I did not come forward and ask to fill because I knew it would likely be problematic. So approval to fill 2 out of the 3 that I was initially seeking.
And you'll still be moving that process along?
To fill the 2, yes, but not for that additional position.
I want to end with this. What keeps the two of you up at night? From a professional point of view.
Trying to get across to the community about compliance. If, you know, our use is a force that people are talking about in the community. If you're just asked to do something, told to do something, do it. Courts are the best place to fight these battles over, not the side of the street, not a hallway. I believe 100% in the justice system and utilize that.
What's your biggest worry?
I think currently for me it's challenges when it comes to budgeting, the volume of work that we have to do with the same amount of resources, and I respect the challenges that our communities have when it comes to, there's only so many dollars out there and we can only raise taxes so many times. So trying to make sure we're meeting the needs of the public and with the services they expect with the funding we have.
But it is unrealistic whenever I hear somebody in government say we're going to do more with less. That's not true.
The reality is, at the point we're at, and I'm sure I can speak for the chief too, we are kind of maxed out, right? So we're doing as much as we can with what we have, and to do more with less is almost nearly impossible. But somehow we keep making it happen.
Well, I want to thank both of you coming on together and talking about. I know we could have done 2 separate shows, but you've had enough interaction with a lot of other things in the last couple of months, and we want to thank you both for the work that you do. Our guests have been Cayuga County Sheriff Brian Schenck, as well as Auburn Police Chief James Slayton, to give us a law enforcement interview, and we'd love to have you back again at the beginning of the year as well, as things progress.
Thank you.
We will be back on Tuesday with Dr. Adam Effler to talk about Owasco Lake and what the last year has been like when it comes to the environment and water quality. We'll also be having several candidate forums in the coming weeks. On Thursday, October 17th, we have the candidates for the 48th Senate District. That's Rachel May, who's the current incumbent, versus Caleb Slater, who's a Cayuga grad. We'll be here in the studio. And on October 22nd, we'll have the candidates for the 126th Assembly District. That's Assemblyman John Lamondes versus Ian Phillips. We'll also have the candidates this coming Thursday, a week from today, for Cayuga County's new judgeship, the family court judgeship. Stephen Bushman and Kristen Garland have both agreed to come into the studio. That is not a debate or a forum. They are going to make a presentation to you about their qualifications. That'll be followed by a show with the Auburn Education Foundation. Finally, we will have Congressman Brandon Williams will be in the studio. He currently is running for the 22nd Congressional District. He'll be here on October 24th, as our past rules have clearly indicated that if one candidate agrees to come to a forum or the dates that we provide and their opponent declines, that candidate who's agreed gets an hour one-on-one interview. Senator Mannion, who's running against him, has not responded to agree to any of the dates that we have provided, and so we'll have Brandon Williams here in the studio. When it comes to the forums, Robert Harding of The Citizen will be asking the questions. He's their government and public policy reporter, and I will do the moderation. Otherwise, I do all the questions here. So if you have questions or ideas, as we had some viewer questions for these two gentlemen and the mayor, if you send them to cozguy@tho@aol.com, we'll hopefully find those guests as well as ask them those questions. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you have a great evening and a great weekend, and we'll see you back in the studio on Tuesday.